Today we're crocheting a granny stitch bucket hat, and for the tutorial I'm just using one color, but you can use two colors to make it look like this. And you'll just change colors every single round. And if you need help changing colors, you can watch my striped beanie tutorial. You can find the free written pattern at vivcrochets.com or at the link in the description box below. And if you do enjoy this tutorial, please leave a like or comment to let me know. Thanks so much, and let's get into the materials. For this project, I'm using about 80 grams of Big Twist favorite cotton in the color cream. And this is a medium or number 4 weight yarn. And you can use any yarn you want, but if you want to follow my sizing guide, then you want to make sure you use a number 4 weight yarn and the same hook size, which is a 5.5mm hook. And I'll also be using some scissors and a yarn needle. And before we begin, let's hear a word from our sponsor. If you crochet a lot, like I do, then it's so important for us to take lots of breaks. And something I've been doing during my breaks is play this super fun mobile game. This is June's Journey, the sponsor of today's video. June's Journey is a hidden object mobile game with a fun twist, which is that you're solving a mystery in the 1920s. June Parker, the protagonist, is on a mission to solve her sister's murder and uncover the secrets within the family along the way. June can be impulsive and stubborn, but she's also clever, confident, and an empowering friend. And although she doesn't have access to resources like police files or a forensics lab, she uses her social and emotional intelligence to critically analyze situations to find solutions. You can meet all the different characters and explore themes such as family and motherhood, betrayal, social injustice, and more through this captivating story. You can also add decorations to your island, join special events for in-game rewards, and join a club to play with friends. Download June's Journey for free by clicking the link below or scanning this QR code. June's Journey is available on iOS and Android mobile devices, as well as on PC. Thank you to June's Journey for very kindly sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the tutorial. First, we're going to start with a magic ring. And to make a magic ring, place the yarn over your hand with the tail end at the bottom. Then grab the yarn with your thumb and make sure you have a good tail, about 4 inches at least. Then grab the top and wrap it around 2 fingers to form an X. And hold it with your pinky. And then we're going to take our hook and go under this side of the X, and then over and grab the other side and pull it through. And then we're going to take our thumb and our first finger on our right hand, and we're going to grab this entire thing and pull it off of our fingers. And make sure this tail end doesn't go through the ring. And then we can grab our working yarn. So we have our ring, and we can make it a little bit smaller by pulling on our working yarn to tighten this ring. And now it's a little bit easier to work into. Now that we have our magic ring, we can start on round 1. And to start every new round, we're going to chain 3. To chain, yarn over, and pull through the loop on your hook. Again, yarn over and pull through. And then we'll do one more for a total of 3 chains. And these 3 chains count as our first double crochet. And next we're going to do 2 more double crochets into this ring. And to do a double crochet, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into the ring, yarn over, pull through, and we should have 3 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and then yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And again, to do another double crochet, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook back into the ring, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So we've just done 2 double crochets, and again, this chain 3 we did counts as our first one. So this counts as 3 double crochets in our magic ring. And then we're going to chain 1. And we're going to do another 3 double crochets into the ring. So yarn over, and do a double crochet into the ring. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And again, we're going to chain 1 and do 3 more double crochets into the ring. And then we're going to chain 1 and we can slip stitch to close the round. So before we slip stitch, we're going to tighten this center by grabbing the tail and just pulling on it to cinch the center closed. And then we're going to do a slip stitch to finish the round. So we're going to connect to the very first double crochet that we made, which is that chain 3. So we're going to find our chain 3 right here, and we're going to slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. So there's the first chain that we made, the second, and the third. That third one all the way at the top, we're going to insert our hook and do a slip stitch. So we're going to yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on our hook and tighten it. So there's round 1, and round 1 has 3 clusters. So clusters are just groups of 3 double crochets separated by the chain 1. So we have 3 clusters in our first round. Now for round 2, again, we're always going to start the round by chaining 3. And from now on, we're only going to be working into these chain 1 spaces between the clusters. So again, there's 3 clusters and 3 chain 1 spaces, which are right here, and right here. And the one right under the chain 3 is always going to be the first space that we're going to work into. And in this space, we're going to do 3 double crochets. And remember, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. So for the first space, we're only going to do 2 more double crochets. So yarn over and go into this space directly under the chain 3 and do a double crochet. And then we'll do 1 more double crochet into this space. So now this first space has 3 double crochets, or 1 cluster. And again, every cluster is separated by a chain 1, so we're always going to chain 1 after a cluster, and then we're going to move over to the next space over here, and we're going to do 3 double crochets into this space. And for this round, we're going to be doing 2 clusters into every space. So after our first cluster into this chain space, so our 3 double crochets, we're going to chain 1 and we're going to work 3 more double crochets into this same chain space. So if you need to, you can push those first 3 double crochets over to the right side and then go back into this same chain space and do 3 more double crochets. So now it looks like that. And again, every cluster is separated by a chain 1. So we're going to chain 1 and work into the next chain space. And in here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do a cluster, chain 1, cluster. So go over to this space and do 3 double crochets. So there's our first cluster, chain 1, and do one more cluster into the same space. And then we're going to chain 1, and now we're back to the very first chain space of this round. And remember, in our first chain space we only did one cluster, and every space needs to have 2 clusters. So we're going to do 3 more double crochets into this space. And then we just need to chain 1 and slip stitch to finish the round. Again, we're going to look for that chain 3, and we're going to slip stitch into that chain at the top. So insert your hook into that chain, yarn over, pull through the loop on your hook, and tighten it. And there is round 2. And at the end of round 2, you should have a total of 6 clusters. So round 3 is going to have the same concept as round 2. For every chain 1 space, we're going to be doing 2 clusters into each space. So again, we're going to start by chaining 3. And that counts as our first double crochet. And we're going to work into the first space, which is at the base of our chain. And we're going to do 2 more double crochets into the space to complete a cluster. So there's our first cluster. So just like with our second round, we're only putting 1 cluster into the first space, but once we work all the way around, we're going to add our second cluster. So after our cluster here, we're going to chain 1, and we're going to move on to this next chain 1 space, and we're going to do a cluster, chain 1, and then another cluster. So there's our first cluster, chain 1, and then 1 more cluster into this chain space. So it looks like that. And then we're going to chain 1, and in this next chain space, we're going to do the same thing. So this one here, we're going to do a cluster, and then chain 1 and 1 more cluster into this chain space. So like that. And then we're going to chain 1 and move on to this chain space, and we'll do the same. 1 cluster, chain 1, and another cluster. Chain 1, and move on to the next chain space. So I forgot to mention it earlier, but this here is a chain space, but it's kind of hard to tell because the clusters are so close together. So whenever you see a point like this with 6 double crochets, just know that there's always going to be a chain 1 in between them. So make sure that you don't miss that chain space. And we're going to continue working. We have 2 more chain spaces. So after going all the way around, we should reach back to our very first chain space that we worked into right here. And just like with the last round, we're going to complete the 2 clusters in this chain space by chaining 1 and doing one more cluster into this first space. And then at the end of every round, we're going to chain 1 and then slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. And there is round 3. And at the end of round 3, you should have a total of 12 clusters. Now round 4 is going to be much easier than the last few rounds. We're only doing one cluster into every chain space. So again, we'll start by chaining 3 and doing 2 more double crochets into this first chain space. So there's one cluster, and we're going to chain 1, move on to the next chain space, and do 1 cluster. And then we'll chain 1 and move on to the next chain space. Again, make sure that you don't skip over this chain space. We're going to do 1 cluster. And then chain 1, and we're going to continue doing 1 cluster into every chain space. And after you've done 1 cluster into each chain space, you should still have a total of 12 clusters. And we're not doing an extra cluster into the first chain space because we only need the first one that we did. So after this final cluster, we're going to chain 1 and slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. And there is round 4. Now round 5 is going to be a little bit different. This is the round that determines the size of your hat. So for a small size, we're going to do 2 clusters into every other space. So that means the first space is going to have just 1 cluster, the second will have 2, then the next will have 1, the next will have 2, then 1, then 2, 1 and 2 all the way around. Now for a medium hat, you're just going to replace one of those spaces that only have 1 cluster with 2 clusters. So somewhere in your round, you're going to have 3 in a row with 2 clusters. Then for a large, you're going to replace 2 spaces that have 1 cluster and do 2 clusters instead. So in the next round, there will be 2 spots where there are 3 spaces in a row that have 2 clusters each, and try to make sure they're on opposite ends of the round. So let's do a size small, which is just doing 1, 2, 1, 2 all the way around. So we're going to start by chaining 3, then doing 2 double crochets into the chain space below. So there's 1 cluster in our first space. We're going to chain 1 and do 2 clusters into the next space. So we'll do our first cluster, chain 1, and do 1 more cluster into the space. So there's 2 into this space. So this is the pattern we're going to repeat. 1 cluster in the first space, 2 clusters in the next, 1 in the next, 2 in the next. So we'll chain 1, and the next space is just going to have 1 cluster. Chain 1 and do 2 clusters into this space. there's our first. We'll chain 1 and do our second cluster. So again, that's what we're repeating. 1, then 2, 1, then 2. So at the end of this round, for a small hat, I have a total of 18 clusters. But for a medium hat, you'll want 19 clusters. So you can just add a second cluster into any space that only has 1. And then for a large, you'll want 20 clusters. So for 2 spaces that have only 1 cluster, for example, these 2, you're going to put 2 instead of just 1. And try to make sure that they're not right next to each other, because that can make it kind of imbalanced. So try to pick either these 2 or these 2 or these 2 to put an extra cluster for a large hat. But once you have the correct number of clusters, we're going to chain 1 and slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. And there is my 5th round. Now for the next 8 rounds, rounds 6 to 13, we're going to do just 1 cluster into every space. So we're going to chain 3 and do 2 double crochets into this first space. Chain 1, do a cluster into this space. Chain 1, do a cluster into this space, chain 1, and just repeat all the way around. And after doing 1 cluster into every single space, we're going to still have a total of 18 clusters, and we can, at the very end, chain 1 and slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. So that's round 6, and we're going to continue repeating round 6 until we have the length of the body that we want and we're ready to start on the brim. And make sure that you try it on as soon as you can and make adjustments to round 5 if you need to. So I stopped after round 13, and if the hat is still too short for you, you can continue adding rounds until it's the length that you want it to be. And once you're done with the body of the hat, we can start on the brim. So for the next round, round 14, we're going to do 1 cluster into the first space, and then 2 clusters into each of the next 2 spaces. And that's the pattern that we're repeating for this round. It's going to go 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2. So start by chaining 3 as always, and then doing 2 double crochets into the first space. And there's just 1 cluster. Chain 1, and in the next space we're going to do 2 clusters. So there's our first cluster. We'll chain 1 and add a second cluster into this space. And then we'll chain 1, and in the next space we'll also do 2 clusters. So there is the pattern we're going to be repeating this round. 1 cluster and then 2 and 2. So we'll chain 1 and do 1 cluster, and then 2 into this one and 2 into the next one. And round 14 should look like this, and you should have a total of 30 clusters. And if you did a medium hat, you should have 31 clusters. And if you did a large hat, you should have 33 clusters. And now we're just going to extend the length of this brim by just adding rounds with only 1 cluster into every space. And we're going to do 3 of these rounds with just 1 cluster into each space. So I've just finished round 17, and you should still have a total of 30 clusters. And if you're happy with the size and the length of your bucket hat, we can fasten off. So after our final slip stitch, to fasten off, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to cut our yarn about this long, and then pull through with your hook and tighten the knot. And the last thing to do is to weave in our loose ends, and we just have 2 from the beginning and the end. So grab your yarn needle and let's do the one in the center. So you want to make sure that your magic ring is pulled all the way, because once you hide your loose end, you can't pull it anymore. So we're going to tighten that and then thread this loose end into our yarn needle. And we're going to go under these loops here. We're just continuing going in that circle just so that the magic ring doesn't come loose. And then with the rest of it, we're going to go out away from the center. So just go under any loops. And then I'm going to go under these loops here to hide it. So just under all these loops here, and then pull the yarn through. And then we can turn around and hide our loose end in the opposite direction. Like that. Pull your yarn through. And make sure you don't pull it too tight that it scrunches up. Just until it's taut. And with the rest of the loose end, we can just trim it off. And that loose end is hidden. And we just have one more. And we're going to thread it into our yarn needle. And just go down under these loops. And we're just going to continue running our needle through these loops. And then I'm just going to keep going down. And then I'm also going to go towards the right. And then once you're done hiding it, we can just trim off the excess. And now our bucket hat is finished. And that's all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And shout out to channel members Brasins, Jaymon, Amarachi, Dylan, Mai, Kayla, Taylor, Casey, Allison, Eilish, Nadine, Joy, and Stacy. You can become a member of this channel and have these little yarn ball badges next to your name whenever you comment, and other perks such as member shoutouts, early access to new videos, discount codes from my Etsy, help with any of my patterns, and connecting on social media. Thank you again all my channel members, and thank you for watching. Also, don't forget to check out June's journey by clicking the link in the description box below or by scanning this QR code, and I'll see you next time.